winding down. Just finished up a session this morning. Put some final touches on things over the next, this afternoon, tomorrow morning. We'll go through a mock scenario on Wednesday and get ready for Thursday night and 3-day weekend. Really nothing much has changed since we started we talked right before the combine, coming through it. Really the numbers look the same positionally. We think on the offensive side it's still, there's good numbers in the wide receivers. The offensive line is probably not as deep as it has been in recent years. The tight end numbers are up, some over recent years. Secondary, there's good numbers in the secondary. There's good numbers in the outside linebacker candidates. Just decent numbers on the defensive line, which isn't unusual. There's not too many of those body types. But really, we've been talking in recent days, a lot of times going into this part of the draft process, we have a pretty good idea about where this thing could go. But this year, it's really an unpredictable draft. There's so many different variables that we see could happen around the league, and I think it all starts with the quarterback position. There's so many, we think, differing opinions on who the quarterbacks are, who's going to take who where, and really it doesn't matter to us. I just think it leads into the unpredictability, because I think you're going to see more trade up and more trade down possibilities, not so much with us, but around the league, depending on people looking for the exact guy that they want. So that part of it is unpredictable, more so than in the past. And of course, we're open to trading up, trade down. We'll make all the calls. We'll know what the cost is to go up. We'll know what we can pick up to go down. And we'll leave ourselves open. But really, we're interested in, we say it every year, we're picking at 30. I'm sure there's 30 guys that can help us. Some years it's easier to say, boy, it looks like we're going to get offensive help or we're going to get defensive help. But this year it's really more unpredictable than it's been in a long time. Coach, anything?
No, it's a usual process for myself and the coaching staff. We've come alongside Kevin and the scouts who've been working tirelessly since training camp. It's been a good process for us. We've gotten out and beaten the bushes, pro days, interviews and things of that nature. Nothing out of the ordinary from the process standpoint. Really excited about getting it going this weekend. And to Kevin's point, there's an added excitement because of the many layers of how this thing could unfold for the reasons that he stated.
Any questions?
Kevin, it's been well past a year since the suspension of Martez Bryant. Have you guys heard anything from the league? Do you expect to hear anything before the draft?
No, and we don't know. We have not heard anything. We do know that he did go for a hearing, but for a review by the league, but we have no information, and we have no idea whether we'll get information prior to or not. So we're just going to operate under the assumption that until he's here, he's not here.
Are you allowed to have contact with him?
Nope.
Does anybody have any draft-related questions for Kevin or Coach?
Well, does that change anything with your receivers going into the draft?
Not
Looking to
really.
draft,
I
okay.
mean, as we said all along, if he's not here, until he's here, he's not here, so we just have to prepare as such. And it doesn't change, whether he would be here or not. We're going to look at all the receivers and be prepared to act accordingly.
Mike, is it less important what position a guy plays and more important what he does as you look at this? Are the lines blurring between small tight end and big wide receiver, slot corner and safety, that edge rusher?
I think that is a great discussion. I think that, and we've spent a lot of time talking about it, they're different, varying animals in today's football drafts. The tight end position being an example of it that you mentioned. Some guys are move guys, some guys are traditional tight ends, some guys are oversized wide receivers. And I think you see the corresponding hybrid animals on the other side of the ball. You have corners who play like safeties. You have safeties who play like linebackers, and so, et cetera. I just think that that's part of today's football from a specialization standpoint, and we're getting an opportunity to see dynamic players that fit those descriptions. But again, that's nothing new. I think guys like Honey Badger and others have been in this league for a number of years who kind of fit those descriptions.
Mike, speaking of tight ends, how is Ladarius coming along, and how is his recovery affecting at all your thinking on the tight ends? I think Kevin mentioned that there's a pretty good tight end class this year.
We don't have an update on any of the medical issues relative to the guys on our team. And like we stated at other locations, I think the owners' meeting being the last one, it won't affect us in terms of our decision making.
When you talk about tight ends, the tight end like Heath Miller, who is equally adept at catching the ball and blocking, does that still exist? And what is the depth of that kind of tight end, if it does exist, in this draft?
Yeah, no, there's certainly well-rounded tight ends for sure. And there's smaller guys, as Mike referenced, that are faster than a traditional tight end. When you see the spread offenses, a lot of times they're taking the traditional tight end and putting them in the slot so they can block on the perimeter for some of their speed passing game. So, whether to say they can't play in an attached formation, I think would be selling their talent short, just that they haven't. It's the same as the quarterbacks. I mean, just because they're not in a traditional offense doesn't mean that they can't, even though they may not be the prototypical 6'5", 255 pounders. They can certainly do some things. And there's smaller guys that play in the league. So even though they don't do it, it doesn't mean that they can't.
Kevin, there are more long corners in this draft than past, and is there any particular reason for that? Is it the taller wide receiver?
You know what, I mean, we haven't added it up. Off the top of my head, I'd say it's no different. There's a couple guys that are taller than in recent years, but I think collectively, they come in all shapes and sizes. And, I'm not so sure the taller guys exist in the college game that much. I'm talking about the receivers because, again, as I referenced, the small, quick guys that get the ball in their hand quick and get upfield are prevalent as well. But really, I don't think this year's class, if you put it together collectively, would be that much difference in terms of height.
Kevin, how do you guys do a mock?
We mock ourselves. I mean, it's impossible to sit here and think about what 31 other teams are going to do and how that can affect you. You drive yourself crazy. So, we were just talking before we came down here. Again, this unpredictability, it's there, but it really is not going to affect us because there'll be 30 people and there'll be 30 people in an order that we like them. So whether they go or not, or someone else takes a guy, we know we're going to get a player, and we just won't be prepared to take him in the order we like him.
But the point on your end would be just to get a guesstimate of who might be available to choose from?
It doesn't matter. I mean, if a guy's not there, if player one's not there, player two will be there, and so on and so forth. So there will be 30. And, of those 30, I'm sure they can upgrade our team.
Kevin, how much does that fifth year play a role in deciding whether to trade out of the first year?
Fifth-year option, it doesn't affect us at all. I can't think that far down the road. We're worried, you're never going to neglect the future, but we're certainly not going to not take a guy. I know it's a double negative. We're not going to stay away from a guy because of that. I mean, we got to win now and in the future, but that doesn't affect us at all.
Kevin, on that mock, how far will you go? Will you mock 7 rounds or just a couple rounds?
We'll get through the first, all the way through a trade down possibility. So in the event that we trade down, we're going to know, if we go 4 spots, do we have 4 people? So we got to be prepared to do that before we get into the room, which we will be. And then what we do is we'll reset our board based on what happened the day before. We'll do it through rounds 2 and 3 on Friday morning, and then we'll do it again Friday evening and then Saturday morning before we get into Saturday, just to see how the rest of it may unfold.
Kevin, when you rank your top 1 to 30, do you always stay in order, or is there variables where you could say, let's say 29 over 27?
Yeah, you're gonna have your board set the way that the players are graded, but that's not how you'll pick them, if that makes any sense. And we don't grade them how we'll pick them, we'll grade them how they are. And then, you know, you get to a quarterback and a corner, in our scenario, you're probably gonna take a corner over a quarterback as long as they're close. If the quarterback is significantly better than the corner, then we may be kicking ourselves if we didn't take the quarterback that was available to us.
Kevin, would you like to add a quarterback in this draft, and what do you think of the depth of that position?
I think we're always open to putting a quarterback in the mix because it is the most critical position in our game. If you don't have a quarterback, then you're probably going to leave your team short at some point. Again, at what cost? We have a great quarterback. We think, you know, that he's going to be here for a while. At least we hope that. And, you know, but we got to be prepared. And again, if somebody shows that we didn't think would be there at a given point, then you have to make sure that you secure that position for the long term. Again, great franchises that have sustained it have done it because they went from Joe Montana to Steve Young, or from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. And you want to be prepared. Again, you don't want to have that lull because if you do, you're probably not going to win a lot of games.
Kevin, last year, the same 5 to 6 names came up at cornerback, for the first round into the early second. Do you find that the pass rushing position this year is kind of similar to that? Like, for instance, if 4 or 5 good pass rushers go off the board, is there still a pretty good one that might be there, kind of like you got already late in the first round last year, corner, after a bunch had gone?
Yeah, the pass rushers, the outside linebackers in our scenario are much harder to predict than a corner. Corner's a corner. The pass rushers, for us, a lot of times are projections, and they may not be valued as high as they are for a 4-3 team who could say, well, he's a 4-3 end. You know, we look at him as a first rounder, whereas we may look at him as a second. So that group is hard to nail down. That's part of the unpredictability. And when we grade these kids, we grade them for the league, not for us. We'll pick them for us, but we'll grade them for the league. So we may have a guy rated higher because we know in a 4-3 scenario, this guy is probably higher on other teams' boards, but we just grade him for the league. So that position is always tricky.
So even though your defense has gotten a little bit more maneuverable in that regard, not strictly just 3-4, but a little bit more, is different, a little bit different than it was a couple of years ago, that's still the case with the pass rush?
Yeah, the numbers of times, I mean, you know, Coach can answer, I believe we're 75 or 73% in sub-package football, but they still have to have a home position. You know, we still have to consider them, are they defensive linemen or are they linebackers? Because you're not going to be in a sub-package the entire time. That's part of the unpredictability of that position, more so than any other, because where they're playing might not be, and most of the time is not where we're gonna ask them to do overall. They're probably gonna have to grow to be outside linebackers.
Kevin, following up on that for a second,